Good afternoon. Welcome to the In Alliance in Trading webinar for today. It's how do you know that that event was successful? Today's topic, we'll go through several ideas that we can give you for tracking your events and determining if they have been successful or not. And we'll determine success by the amount of attendance as well as the overall economic impact that has been retrieved from that event. By way of housekeeping, for those of you that have not attended a In Alliance in Training webinar, it's very simple. You have a couple of different ways that you can ask questions. One, you can raise your hand and use your voiceover on your computer and ask a question. You're also provided with a phone number that you can use your phone in addition to this webinar. And then also you can type in a question for us, which tends to be the one that most people like to use, because I will repeat the question so that everybody understands what the question is in relation to the answer. There's some contact information for me in front of you. Feel free to contact me after this webinar if you have any additional questions via email or phone. Also, this webinar is being recorded, and at a very soon time after today's presentation, it will be available to all Illinois Main Street members via the Illinois Main Street website. First question that I'm going to ask you today is, why do we even study these events? There's a variety of reasons that I'm often given as to why we don't study these events. It's too time consuming, it's too difficult, we don't know how to get accurate numbers. Who really wants to read this stuff anyways? We do the same event every year, things don't really change. Those are a lot of the reasons that we see that these events do not get surveyed and do not have an idea of the understanding. However, I want to bring several things to your attention as before we proceed with some of the ideas. Economic impact for these community events are a very crucial tool in your Main Street arsenal for attracting investment. What we find more and more is, especially when we evaluate or do assessments in Main Street communities, we ask, how successful is that event? And we often hear, oh, it's very successful. We've been doing it for 10 years. Well, how many people came to the event? Oh, there was between 200 and 600, 300 and 400, 500 and 700, 1,000, 3,000. We've heard numbers with very long-ranging maximums and short-ranging minimums. It's difficult for us to determine exactly, what was that impact, and then simply having a head count is not all that takes place in the reason for having these events. More and more, as you try to garner support, especially from your village and municipal governments, they want to know, what is the economic benefit? What is the tax benefit? What are our businesses gaining anything? Are our residents getting anything out of this? Are we bringing new dollars to the town by way of tourism? Of course, when you're bringing in corporate sponsorship, when you're asking for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 from a company, they want to know where that money is going. What's it going to be given for, and what is the return on investment? Another reason that we strongly urge you to collect economic impact of events is so that you have a media news story ready in hand. Tangible numbers, though they make good sales tools for garnering support for investment, they also are very important for putting together media news stories. And of course, it's one more study that your community has in its arsenal of studies, so that you can see the overall economic impact of the tourist activities that you have within your community. Purchases, when we look at the direct impact of events, one thing that we always want to do is we want to see what are the direct and indirect impacts of these events. For the purpose of today's topic, mostly I'll be talking more about the direct impacts, and quite frankly, those are more readily attainable, even though they can be difficult to some to to assimilate all the information. The direct impact by way of this checklist are typically local purchases that have been made for the event. So if you have to rent tables from a local distributor, if you have to buy food from a local grocery store or farmer's market, if you have to purchase beverages, alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages from local distributors, those are all at direct economic benefit in your local economy. Also, is there any jobs or work that's been created for either the residents or the local companies in your area? If you have to put together a stage, do you have to hire people to do that? You have to hire additional people to do maintenance on the facility and or the area by way of trash cleanup to other types of maintenance areas. What are the actual patrons' purchases while they're at the event? And we'll talk about this at length at the conclusion of the webinar. Where are they spending their money? Are they just spending it with the vendors that are from out of town? Are they spending it with the local businesses, or are there other places that they're spending it? Also, the vendor purchases while at the event. This is one thing that I see a lot of times is underestimated, and actually it can be a pretty substantial number. There's a requirement that we've seen in some main streets, especially food vendors, that they have to purchase their food locally and their beverages locally and that type of thing, or as much of it as they possibly can, of course. There's always vendors have to make purchases when they come to town. Oftentimes they stay overnight. If they don't, even if they have an RV, they have oftentimes a rental place that they stay at, or of course they probably oftentimes will stay at your local hotels. The indirect impacts are all those secondary effects that are derived from all your directs. It's where any expenditure that can lead your local suppliers to purchase more. These secondary purchases represent every single indirect impact that are out there. It's a variety of examples of indirect impacts that are out there. A lot of times the indirect impacts are very difficult to put a dollar amount to. However, if you can collect those, we definitely recommend that you do. But by way for the purpose of reporting, the direct impacts are the ones that's going to have your most tangible numbers. All of your indirect impacts are going to be more intrinsic in value typically. One question that we always ask a Main Street community is we want to know who exactly has showed up. What type of person shows up? We encourage you through the promotions committee, though, looks at a variety of promotions that they do. They look at the festival types, the afternoon, the evening shows, the actual events that help ring the cash registers for the local businesses. They're working on a variety of a host of events to look at. But for the purpose of statistically evaluating your events, what you first need to ask yourself, is this a gated event or is it an ungated event? In other words, is there a single or a less than a handful of egresses to the event? Is this the event that requires tickets to be sold? Anytime there is a ticket, that is considered to be a gated event. Of course, we encourage you to have as many ticketed events as you possibly can, because that is the absolute best way to achieve a head count and start the process of understanding who has actually participated in each of your events. These are relatively simple to track, and I'm not going to burden you today with those examples. However, at the conclusion or during the webinar, if you have questions about this, I'd be glad to answer those. But for the most part, they're very simple to track. It's all by way of ticketing system, and setting up any type of surveys or tally among those participants is usually quite simple to put together. The head count is easily achieved by whoever is the gatekeeper. That could be the ticket salesman, or more in a literal sense, the person or persons working the gate or gates. However, we live in a world that people come and go, and the ability to sell tickets is always a challenge because there's always a direct cost and value addition to the participant. Of course, events that have traditionally not sold tickets or required tickets, it's always extremely difficult to start in with that new process. So we call these events ungated. This is where it becomes not so simple to track, because events a lot of times are not only for 1 hour or 30 minutes, or they oftentimes are all-day events, all weekend events. Oftentimes there's events going on at several different venues, in the community. A lot of barriers that come in mind as we try to achieve an idea of who participated in our event. Tickets, of course, they may or may not be an option. You might be able to sell tickets, or it might be a partial ticket. Getting into the event is free, but for alcohol sales, everybody that's required to produce ID demonstrating they're over 21 is issued an armband, and that becomes a form of a ticket. But then we have all the non-participants with the alcohol. Of course, we have all the underage that we have to account for. It's going to be impossible. It's difficult at best, but it's usually impossible to get an exact head count. But don't worry about that. We're not looking for an exact head count. Before we move on, another idea that I want to bring to your understanding is there's a difference between tourism economic impact and ordinary economic impact. Tourism, and that should be spending, sorry about that, tourism spending is the amount that is spent from non-residents that have traveled to the event and spent money in the community. And of course, you then also have local resident spending. I challenge each of you with at least your major events that you have throughout the year. I challenge you to look more at the tourism economic impact, or the TEI as we call it, to demonstrate exactly how much fresh dollars are you bringing to the community. An ideal summary at the end of the event, you should be able to fill out these 4 points. This Main Street Festival brought in this number of tourists to the downtown. These tourists generated this amount of economic impact. We created this number of jobs for the community because of these events, and we added this amount of dollar to the local taxpayers' coffers. Now, this becomes a very challenging statement to complete. Oftentimes, it's even at bullet number 1, how many people did we bring? Sometimes that's a challenge in itself, and then understanding how much they spent. If we have those 2 numbers, we can a lot of times figure out how much local tax that we've added to the event by just doing the multipliers. And then how many jobs were created, if any. A lot of events create very temporary jobs, and it becomes pretty negligible, especially in the smaller communities. But in the larger communities, sometimes there's more permanent jobs that have been created that we need to make sure that we are accounting for. I want to make myself very clear at this point of the conversation is that we do not recommend at every event gather this TEI, or this tourism economic impact. You have a lot of events throughout the year that bring in a handful of people. You have a lot of events that really are not marketed and or targeted for anybody except the local residents. They're merely events to build sense of community with the local residents and give them an exchange and opportunity for other programs than what they're used to. If an event you feel draws less than 10% from people outside of the community, I really would not waste your time in trying to collect information on the effects, economic impact of that event. If you happen to host an event that just by chance is also in connection with regional events, one example that comes to mind, this was a community that I was familiar with. There's a minor league baseball championship game. This was a couple of years back, and a local event had just a local festival that they've been having for several years in this community that was around 20, 30 miles away from this championship game. However, all the hotels in the area had been filled up because of this minor league championship, and so a lot of people came out to this event. They thought, wow, this event's really taken off. And after doing just a thumbnail survey and just getting around talking to some people, they say that most of them were there for this minor league game that was actually in the next county over. So you need to kind of be aware of that. How to look at a statistically valid head count. Again, when we work with Main Street communities, and we're pitching that this is a good validation for the program to pursue TEI types of research. A lot of people say, well, I have no idea. There's no way I can know how many people attend this event. I can't get to the exact amount. Well, I'm going to give you several math problems here in the next series of slides that show you how we can statistically validate that head count. And these techniques are used by, if you were to hire professional marketers and professional surveyors, this is statistically how they would present you with reports. So I'm going to give you some examples of how that is done. When you decide if you're going to get a head count and you're going to start getting economic impact studies for events started in the area, these are the bullets that you need to make sure that is a part of each of your programs. First off, you need to have a map. This can be either a real map or one that you generated to hypothetically show the layout of the event. You need to plot on that event map all the main and, of course, any plausible ingresses and egresses. That could be back alleys, walking spaces that maybe residents would use, not necessarily people driving into your area. If you live in a more metro area where that you might have more public transportation, of course, areas where there's bus stops, train stops, and that type of thing need to be clearly marked on these maps. Of course, you need to have all the events clearly marked on this map. I have an example on the next slide, so for those of you that are wondering what this would look like. You want to make sure that you have enough interviewers on site to systematically tally or count the attendees. We'll go through some ideas on approximately how many you need with that here in just a short while. You need to come up with a simple questionnaires. I do have an example and can definitely provide you more than is included in this webinar if you want to contact me after this at some point. You want to verify, the purpose of the questionnaire is you want to verify and prevent duplication of head count. A lot of times that's the opening question. Have you been surveyed? Yes or no? And that becomes a way to prevent that from happening. You want to collect basic demographic data. The demographic is not so much male, female, but more where do they live at. You can almost say it's geographic data. Collecting a zip code is great, but sometimes just merely do they live in the town, live in the county, or outside of the area. That's some of the main things that you want to look at. And then you want to assess your spending data. Absolutely, and we'll talk about this in detail in just a moment, but absolutely the best way to assess spending data is to tabulate it directly by way statistically from the asking the people who are spending the money. And of course, finally, you need to make sure that you have a processing plan so that you can put together all this information that you're going to collect. Surveys collected that are never reviewed. Spending data that's collected but not put in correlation with the surveys. all of this is meaningless, and you spend a lot of time, you've wasted a lot of volunteer time if you don't have the initiative and or the ability to put this in a report type format. Again, I want to reassure you that you do not, hands down, you do not anticipate that you're going to get 100% information. You're only getting a statistical data, a statistical percentage, and that is the estimate that you'll have for your attendance. This is a type of sample grid zone map that I would recommend that you use. You can have this offset with roads and parking lots and other things like that that might be beneficial to you. But the main thing is that when you're working with volunteers, you're working with people that's going to be helping you with this process, it's important that they be assigned zones. For instance, you can look at the Zone 6 and Zone 7 areas at the bottom of the map. The Zone 7 is the open air band shell. And of course, this is probably where most of your entertainment is going to be taking place. You might have other events going on throughout the day, but if the purpose of your event is to have entertainers in your open area band shell, throughout, at least during the concert times, Zone 6 and of course Zone 7 is going to be filled up quite more. What I recommend with this grid is sometimes it's very difficult to look at an area out in front of the viewing area, out in front of a concert, and get any type of valid statistical data. The risk of duplicating head count, the risk of losing your place where you're at can be very difficult. So I recommend that you have visual points out along the way that you can say to this volunteer, you are responsible for point N1 or N2 or J2 or J1, I should say, all the way to J8 and N8, and they can put a square area, and you can literally put flags out. You can use telephone poles as markers, corners of buildings, trees, anything like this to help you outline these zones so that people know what areas that they are responsible for in collecting data. And I'll give you information in that in just a moment. There's about, if you look at marketing handbooks on this type of thing, there's probably about 10 or 15 different ways of getting head count methods. There's even suggestions always to get an aerial photograph of the event, but it's we all know the expense and the virtual impossibility to get a plane to fly over your event at the right time and during various times to take pictures of your plot. There's several other ways of getting this, but the three that I like the most of getting head counts are the entrance counter approach, the vehicle counts, and the tag in and tag out. I'm going to briefly go in, just go over the inner counter approach, the vehicle counts, because a lot of times I've seen these not be foolproof. So the tag in, tag out is something that I like the best. It seems to be one that's used very infrequently. But I'm hoping at the end of this presentation you'll have a better idea of how it works, and you'll be able to pursue it at your next event. First off is the inner counter approach. This one I typically recommend that you post 1, 2, no more than 3 volunteers at the ingresses and egresses to your event. Sometimes you can create these egresses by merely putting up barricades or roping off or different things like that so that you can funnel people through a particular area. And up to a point, as a matter of fact, I've seen spray paint sprayed down the middle of an entrance so that basically there becomes a left and right hand side walking into the event. But those are used so that volunteers can be posted at either side of that, and they can count all the people going through on their side of the spray-painted line. This becomes a great tool just to get the head counts as they go through. This also works great if you have specific, like a shortened event, like an evening concert, or a blues festival where you have people coming in for different acts and that type of thing. If you have an all-day event with several events going on, like maybe you have a car show in conjunction to a swap meet or something in that particular way, people are coming for a variety of reasons, and they're coming from a variety of directions. Sometimes the entrance counter just does not work and becomes very confusing. Another way of doing it is a vehicle count. In some of the small towns, this becomes difficult to use. Some of the larger towns where they block off specific parking lots for the events, this becomes a fabulous tool for you to use. Literally position a couple of people at the entrance of the parking lots, and just every other, one person is responsible for a vehicle, then the next person is responsible for the next one, so that they can keep interchanging. They literally mark the vehicle down and how many people that they see when it goes by. It's a very, very simple process, and you can get a very accurate head count this way. However, if you've got if you have a downtown event, or you have something to the effect where you have local residents, local business owners, you have people coming to a school or coming to a hospital maybe that's nearby, or other visiting for a lot of other reasons. So in other words, the parking lots are used in duplication for a lot of other services. This becomes a very difficult process to assess exactly how many people did come to that event. Also, this one I see to be less important whenever that public transportation is either a major part of people's means of getting to the event, or even if it's a substantial part of the way that people get to an event. However, if you have an event, especially in your more urban areas, if you have an event that is very near the train station stop or the bus stop, it's a great way because you can position some volunteers on either side of those intercepts and count people coming and going off the buses. One approach that I like that we call the tag in, tag out approach. We're going to go into this in just a little bit more detail. But it's basically a way that we can get a statistical head count by merely marking people when they come through. And typically we mark them not by spray painting their shirts or giving them bright colored hats or something to that effect, but we give them a brightly covered object, a lot of times it's a lanyard or a button or something like that. Of course, this is with their approval. What you want to do is you want to put together a preset amount of tags. I recommend that you distribute them in a ratio of around 1 to 10 people. So just for instance, if you have an event and you think that you might have 1,000 people show up to this event, I would make up 100 of these tags of some kind. And again, they can be a lanyard, make them very specific to the event because they might be a little bit collectible. They can be wristbands, but they need to be very bright. It needs to make sure it's a summertime or a time that they're not wearing long sleeves so that you can continue to see that band, or some sort of a badge or button. The badge or buttons, I will have to say that they tend to stay on a little bit longer than the lanyards. People get tired of wearing the lanyard, they'll pull it off. The button they seem to forget about. So, it's kind of up to you on what that you use, but you're looking for something that you can clearly identify people that have come in here, and I'll give you the understanding of that here in just a moment. One thing that we do when we're distributing these tags is we want to let them know that they are a part of, they're going to ask why, they got it and somebody else did it. You want to make it very clear to the person that you are trying to achieve some economic impact, that you are doing surveys, and that gives everybody, the reviewers, an idea of how many people are actually in the in participation. Sometimes you will just have people that don't want to be a part of it or don't want to be responsible for having to wear this around. Just simply give it to the next person. Do not get hung up on this of giving it to every 10th person that comes through. However, don't give it to the first 10 people that come through, okay? So what I always tell everybody, especially when you're working with untrained volunteers, they have an idea what random is. Just go with it. Just because it may not fit a perfectly mathematical or scientific method of randomness, make sure that that there is basically no bias or routine in how that the tags are distributed. Okay, then you want to have your imaginary zones picked. Okay, I recommend that you do this at the peak of the event. If you can get enough volunteers to do this, and again, if you kind of look at the zones that we have, I recommend that you have 2 volunteers for up to 500 people per zone. If you can get enough volunteers, the ideal situation is 2 volunteers per 100 people in a zone. So you're going to say, well, this is the first time we've done this. We're not sure exactly how many people are here. Just get a rough estimate. You've done enough events. You probably have an idea on what's going to be out there. But for every area, if your zone is larger than 30 feet, you need more volunteers. Roughly a volunteer inside of a crowd can see about 25 to 30 feet when they're doing head counts. So kind of keep that in mind whenever you're working out the number of volunteers that you need. You have these imaginary zones set up. Now you're ready to do your head count. You need 2 volunteers per zone. You'll want 1 to count the people with the tags and 1 to count the people without the tags. And again, we recommend this to do this during the peak time because that's when you're going to have the most people there. Then of course you can statistically say another way of doing this is to give different colored tags throughout the day. And do this at a variety of times throughout the day, maybe like every 3 hours or something like that. But for the most part, you'll have an idea on when is your peak times. You can look at your agenda. You can look at what the events are having on place. We know that we tend to know that if you've got an all-day event, more people show up in the afternoon than they do in the mornings. So there's just a lot of things here that factor in that. But use your own judgment call. But during this time, you want to count the tags. So 1 person counts the people with the tags, and 1 person counts the people without the tags. You know that you statistically did a 1 to 10 ratio. So for every tag that's counted, you're assuming there's 10 people out there. In other words, if there's 100 tags, there's 1,000 people out there. However, this is the reason of counting the people without the tags. The total attendance is estimated by the ratio of the tag to the untags, or that they're recaptured at the peak time. Here's an example of that. Okay, let's look at our assumptions that we had here. You assume that you gave out a tag for 1 in every 10 people. You know how many tags that you had available to distribute. We're going to say for this example that we had 300 tags. At the time of the zone count, which we're assuming it's at that peak time, it's about 10 minutes, 30 minutes after the concert has started, if you're having a band or whatever it might be. At that time, you counted in your zone 20 tags, and there was 350 non-tags counted. Merely doing the math, 350 divided by 20 comes out to 17 and a half. So in other words, 1 in 17 and a half, 1 to 17.5 people is how many tags are out there in this particular zone. Now, this might be at the closer to the entrance or up to, close to the front of the stage at the concert. When you go to further back, you counted 300 non-tags and over 40 tags, and you can see that where this how you do the ratios, and you take everybody's ratio from all of their zones at the end of the day, and you come up with what the total is. And again, that total is merely multiplied. You know you have 300 tags. Multiply what that non-tag count comes to, and it comes to 5,250 people in attendance at peak time in all the at this particular zone. It's a very simple percentage to use, and it's one that a lot of statisticers and a lot of marketers use out there. In addition to getting a head count, this doesn't tell us anything about the performance of the attendees that were at this particular event. So you have to have an event survey. If you have an event that's not going to have, that you can think that you cannot collect a minimum of 200 surveys, I recommend that tourism economic impact be foregone. So this kind of gives you an idea of what we think that you should be doing with tourism economic impact. If you don't have an event that brings in several hundred people or more, probably the economic impact that you're going to gain from this is going to be negligible, and is going to be difficult at best for you to prove that that the event is actually bringing reoccurring economic development to the area. However, if you think that you can get 200 surveys, this is a general flow chart that I like to use for the particular survey. Oops, sorry about that. One thing that you want to look at, do you have a gut feeling, or have you have enough predetermination that are over 10, that at least 10% are non-residents? Are they tourists? Are they coming here? Because we know that if they are tourists and are coming to an event, they have got cash in their pocket and they're coming there to spend it that day. That is their days, evenings, weekends, entertainment, and they're going to spend money. A local resident may or may not have cash and may or may not spend it in their local area, at least not at the rate of what the tourist does. You want to make sure that you have trained volunteers for the survey. You want to make sure that they are responsible people. This is a great use of younger people in support of your Main Street program. They have the energy, they have the oftentimes the charismatic ability, and they have the ability to understand the processes that go along in putting together, in collecting the information that goes into a survey. You want to look for friendly, outgoing people. There's actually surveys and statistics on this all over marketing research sites about the amount of surveys that do not get filled out by people that have a glum or non-approachable type of personality. They need to be outgoing, smiling, and very to the point as to what they are doing. They've got to be able to understand the procedures that take place in this, so that you don't come at the end of their time where they spent 2 hours collecting surveys, all day spending surveys, but you don't want to come to the end of their shift and find out that they filled out the survey wrong or collected the wrong information from the wrong individuals. Also, do not forget this, especially if you're bringing people from out of the area. Make sure that your volunteers or people that are collecting survey information, make sure they are clearly identified. A T-shirt with simply having Main Street Volunteer put on it, a hat, a button, something that shows that they're there. And it's also nice if you can afford the printing of it, or just make up name tags, have their name clearly put on the front of their shirt, so that they are instantly approachable and instantly not felt like there is any threat once they walk up to a person to get the survey information collected. You want to make sure that when they do their short survey, which I'll give you examples of those questions in just a moment, you want to make sure that it's very short and less than 2 minutes long. You want to teach them that they need an interview rhythm. They need to be very conversational. They need to give a very short introduction, 15 seconds to less, go through the series of questions and to the point, and of course give them a big thank you at the end. If you happen to be able to afford or have anything provided that you can give individuals as a result of their participation in the survey, that is always highly recommended. However, we know that budgets on these events sometimes just preclude that from happening. The next thing with the surveys is make sure they stay in their zone, but that the randomness of selection is very important, that they collect the information. In other words, don't go to their friends and family first. There's nothing wrong with being a part of the survey selection, but they need to make sure that they go to random people and at random times throughout their shift. This might be a little bit difficult to see. I'll just kind of read it here to you. This is just a simple strike-through sheet, or a simple sample sheet called a strike-through sheet that you can use to get the tally. Up here at the top, this particular area right here is a place that you, draw very good with my keypad there, is an area that you just strike through for people that did not want to be approached to do the survey. It's very important that you collect that data so that you can kind of see the randomness of this and gives you an idea on how many people additionally were approached. Across this area, these areas here are your question formats, and it gives you the idea. Here's the question then, and then down here it gives you responses and where to put that information as you go down. And again, this particular tally sheet can hold about 10 responses per tally. You can turn this other ways. You don't have to include all these questions, and you can, of course, get a lot more that's on there. Just kind of going across the top, question one, have you already been surveyed today? Simple yes or no. No, you may want to go on to somebody else, or if you want to keep information, just go ahead and keep it as a part of your survey and factor that in or out of your final report. Next thing you're asking them, are they local or are they non-local? In other words, do they live in the area? If they do live wherever they live at, you want to maybe collect some demographic information. Again, the most important part is the zip code. This particular tally is put in a little bit more information on there. Next thing you might want to do is if they've spent how many nights away that they've been from the house. Okay, did they come in for this event last night? They're going to stay a couple of nights in your town. It's a good place to get lodging numbers from your survey respondees. Next is how many people's in their party. Do they come with a family? They come with a girlfriend, a boyfriend. They come with a spouse. Come with family members. Whatever they might come with, put that in there. Okay. How many, you might want to look at, especially if you've got kid-oriented events or if you have over 21, in other words, adult-oriented events, if you want to collect that particular information to see if your marketing and see if your events have been working for them. You might want to see how many's in the party that's under certain years old or actually over a certain age difference, however that you might want to look on that. Then you want to look at if they've got any type of tickets that might be that's been instituted. You might want to say if you collected any of those tickets, where they bought food tickets, where they bought drink tickets, where they bought event tickets, anything like that. That might be important to you. And of course, if you've got a multi-day event or multi-venue event, you might want to collect information on which venues they attended and what events that they attended. However, I will tell you that this is a very detailed tally sheet. Probably many of you would not use this much detail, but the most important part is have they been surveyed, yes or no? Are they from the area, yes or no? The zip code is nice, and of course, how many's in the party? Excuse me. Okay. Another type of survey, I've just added another one in here. This is either something that you can use in addition to the other one, or this is just another type of survey that's out there just to quickly get some information from your attendees. Again, all of this takes less than 2 minutes, typically less than a minute to complete. Just another type of tally sheet. Now this one is kind of more allows for only one response per tally sheet, so the expense of printing this one out might be a little bit more expensive. You might be able to work this into more of a spreadsheet format or a column and a table type format and get more per sheet. This gives you an idea on the number of questions that you should ask and how to collect some of the more pertinent information. Finally, we want to get to an idea on how much was actually spent. We've got an idea on how many's attended now. We've got an idea on where they're from, where they live at. Now we need to get an idea on how much they've spent so that we can get to our total economic impact. Here's a way that you can get spending determination. The first bullet point, I have my tongue in my cheek because I know it typically, if it happens, I've personally have never witnessed it, but maybe it could in your particular area. That's to tally every single business and service provider in your area and see how they say sales went and get a dollar amount for the number of increase in sales, or at least their dollar amount in sales during that event. It's time consuming and probably is going to be fruitless. Most will probably not return your call, and if they do, they probably are not going to give you a number that's going to be satisfying to you. Another way that is definitely statistically plausible, if you want to pursue this, is to look at your total provider list, business provider list, service provider list in the district that you are servicing. Now, a lot of you are downtown main streets. A lot of times your hotels, motels, they're more not specifically in your district, but of course that is an overall impact to your community and something that needs to be tallied, something that you need to look at. So it's, in other words, do you want to include them or not? I recommend that you do. But you look at how much retail you've got, the bar, restaurants, lodging, all the transportation, vendors, will come back in a second, any other service providers, and of course don't forget about if you do sell tickets, that is also an economic impact for the event. Vendors, if they are outside vendors, I challenge you to only take the impact of anything that they were required to purchase locally. Did they have to purchase rental space for their vendor spot? Did they have to purchase local goods such as food, beverage, lodging, that type of thing? Anything that they personally spent, that's the only real economic impact, because if they are not from the local area, all of those dollars are flowing right out of your community. However, if you are fortunate enough that you only have local vendors that are servicing your event, then by all means do a representation of them and get an idea on their net sales or on their gross sales. Okay. A more specific way and a more statistical way to get an idea on how much is spent is to actually make this a part of your surveys. Now, talking about a demographic survey that we first did, a locational survey, and then we've got this another survey. These surveys can be from the exact same people, or they can be different people. It's however you choose to do it. By the time, though, that you ask them all the locational information and demographic information, and then you start asking them information on their spending habits while they're there, you're taking up a long time. Word will get around after you've done a few surveys. It'll spread through an event that you're taking 10 minutes of their time to get through surveys. Sometimes it's easier to split these surveys up and collect it from more individuals. So statistically, if you think about it, you're looking just for a percentage of individuals that have participated in the event. I recommend a total of 200 surveys. Here's a sample spending survey. There's a lot of other ways that you can do this, but this is definitely one that I like. It gives a quick idea on how much that they spent on site. In other words, how much to get in, how much did they spend at the local eateries and bars and that type of thing, how much did they buy in souvenirs, how many food and beverages did they buy from the vendors, what was their total parking, if they had any parking fees, how much was that. Then, of course, if they have any type of way out of town expenses, plane trips or anything like that, definitely collect that information. And of course, then all of the other spending that they might have while they are participating in this event, and coming in the night before, spending the entire weekend, doing things after they leave the event around town. This is kind of where you collect these type of items. Okay. Okay. What you're going to look at next is you're going to need to put together your TI-EI study after you've got all this information collected. You want to make sure that you have an attendee count. Now, you've got your head count. This is a number that you can take, whether you've got it specifically, where you were able to watch the ingresses and egresses and do a very specific head count, or if you did it statistically by one of the means, such as the tag-in, tag-out approach. But it's very scientifically correct, and it's very difficult to argue a point that their head count was not accurate. Then you want to get your tally from all of your attendees, all your residents and non-residents. You want to determine what was the overall participation there. And then you want to get a survey of the attendees on the spending activity. Literally, what I would recommend is once you've, go back to the slide just so that you can see it. Once you have this spending survey completed, you literally can multiply this, add this all up, add all these numbers up individually, divide by the number of surveys that you've got, and that becomes the per individual average spending. Okay? So if you do 200 of these surveys, and then in a line, such as food and beverages at restaurants and concessions at the event, if you fill out that line on the 200 surveys, that totals up to $25,000, and you know you have 5,000 attendees. Merely divide the 25,000 into the 5,000, and that's the average that the per person spent at the event. This, of course, is a statistical deviation that you must always approach with anybody. What I typically say that if you've done 200 surveys, and that is at least, if that is a minimum of 20% of your participation, that is only less than a 5% standard deviational error. Okay? And that is just standard survey practices. Okay. Now, if you have 200 surveys and you only have 500, of course your standard deviation goes down. So kind of use that as an idea. But 20%, when you survey 20% of a attendance, that's typically a standard deviation of less than 5. If you survey 10%, it's typically a standard deviation of between 7 and 8. Okay? All right, let's go back to the other slide. Of course, the last component is putting all this information together and putting together tabulations with all this information. This is a pretty good sample flow of how the flow chart should look for your tourism economic impact study that you're putting together. You want to have all your attendee counts so that you can give it validity from the very beginning. Then you want to have a tally showing exactly where these individuals are from. And of course, then you want a survey that shows exactly how much they spent, and this works into an analysis plan. Okay, this kind of gives you a couple of different breakdowns of how to get to that analysis plan. It's a good flow chart for that, but the main thing that it is it takes very statistical numbers and brings it into more scientific process by the end of your project. And of course, as with any good market analysis, the use of tables and graphs are going to be a much more of a selling point than just hard physical numbers. By way of conclusion for our event today, I want you to remember these points. Giving you a lot of information here. For an event of 1,000 people, probably it's going to take you 10 to 20 volunteers to collect all the information, at least the way that I put it in front of you today. Again, that's people working some shifts and working some zones and then helping tabulate all the information. It can be quite cumbersome. If you can't collect all the information that I recommended in this particular presentation, collect some of it as often as you can. If you can just get a valid head count, that's better than not having anything at all. As I gave you a recommendation in the very forefront, you do not getting an economic impact of every single event is a lot to consume. It's a lot of burden to put on volunteers in your organization, and it just quite frankly will not get done. What I suggest you do is challenge yourself, if you don't do this already, to work up a way of evaluating this at least by the end of 2013, no later than 2014. Pick out one of your biggest events. And of course, there's actually two ways of thoughts on this. Maybe pick out one of your smaller events so that you don't have to have as many volunteers. You can kind of coordinate the effort better. But I recommend that, if you can coordinate one volunteer, you can coordinate 10 volunteers. Is put together, whatever you think your biggest event is going to be for the upcoming year, and institute some of the ideas that I've given you here today as well as others. You want to make sure that if you're not a board member participating today, if you are a director, make sure that you build cause with your boards and committees as to why this has to happen. It's an excellent fundraising tool, and that really should be the end and be all with your board and committees. But if it's not, explain to them about the valuable data that you have, and it's a way to reassure the committees, especially the promotion committee and the economic development committees, that you are bringing value to the community via your program. Don't get hung up on this, that you have to do this at that one big event every year, that you have to do this annually. Getting good, solid information from a big event. If you don't change up your events, very often a lot of us, a lot of your communities have the same events year in and year out with just a slight modification. As the events grow, maybe consider doing the process again. I recommend that if you have survey data that's more than 5 years old, though, it's probably not going to be valid anymore, and I recommend that you update it at that point. And last but not least, don't forget, the easiest sale when you're pitching for funds for your organization, or you're looking for the media to pick up on the importance of your organization and events that you have, it's so easy to sell when you can give them tangible numbers. X amount of people showed up. We know this because we had we professionally surveyed it and scientifically surveyed it. We know that they spent this amount of money. We can document how we came up with our findings, and we know that this generated this amount of tax base for our community as a result. Okay, that concludes our webinar for the day. Would like to take any questions that you might have. Okay, I've got several hands up here. Just a moment, I'll pull them out. Okay, here's a couple of questions right now. One is, what is your opinion about the post-event surveys through the email or social media sites? I absolutely love those, okay? The thing is, your primary surveys, if the ones that you can collect as people are attending the event and or just leaving the event, it is more accurate information, and plus, statistically, you're going to get more returned. Very few people turn down a friendly person coming up to them to ask them a few seconds of questions, and you'll get a lot more information while that you have those. The surveys to the email are great as long as you can track them. The surveys with the social media sites, make sure that your questions are not, and again, this is with any survey question, but especially on the social media site, make sure that they're very clear. make sure that people understand exactly what that they are being asked, and give very short answers to people. A lot of times don't like to answer long, drawn-out questions on the social media sites. Next question is, how accurate would your head count be if you asked people to check in via social media? It will not be accurate, so do not use it. The check-ins for the are you going to this event type thing just literally don't work. And then, of course, when they check in, when they get there, there's a lot of issues with check-in right now. So do not use that as an accurate head count. However, there is nothing wrong, a part of your total economic impact study that you do at the end, and say, oh, by the way, we had 200 check-ins at this event. That will speak to some people, especially the social media nuts out there, like myself. Another thing is, the other question is regarding regionalism. How far away does someone have to come from in order for you to count them? That is specifically up to your program. If you have a community that only has one zip code, you statistically could say every zip code except that one is considered to be regionalism. However, we know in most of our rural communities that we have throughout Illinois, my community being one of them, where there's 2,500 people that live in my hometown and only 6,000 people in the whole county, it would not be very statistically behooving of us to track anything within the county, because with our community being the major hub, the only hub in the entire county, the community's used to traveling there, and we consider them to be locals. So what you might want to do, you kind of need to talk it over with your board and kind of talk it over with your promotion committee on how you want to do it. My recommendation is for the very rural communities that anything outside the county is considered to be tourism related. But some of your bigger communities, of course, anything specifically outside the zip code of the host Main Street community, we consider to be tourism. Okay, are there any other questions? Very good questions. Any other questions? Okay, while you're thinking, our next In Alliance in Training webinar will be entitled The Importance of Historic Designation. It will be next Wednesday on May the 15th at 1:30. Again, all of these are recorded. They will be hosted on the Illinois Main Street site. So if you have any questions or want to review the videos, make sure that you go back there and please share those with other people in your organization. It's a great opportunity for them to gain a lot of information about the Main Street approach. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. Thank you for attending and look forward to our next one. Have a great day.